Here in the middle of the Egyptian desert, something unusual is happening. Huge green circles have started appearing in the sand. From far away, it almost looks like a giant river is being built across the desert, with dozens of smaller canals spreading out from it, and even more still under construction. In some places, there are marks in the sand that look like underground pipes. Is Egypt trying to flood its desert? New roads are being built and big buildings are rising. Military bases are also appearing, not just one, but several. We decide to see it with our own eyes. We plan to fly in and find someone who can show us everything. But when we ask, nobody wants to talk. Some people even seem scared for their safety. What is going on here? The green circles lead us to huge construction projects that have been built very quickly in the desert. We also find wild plans to move water into the desert, a strict government that controls almost everything, and a country struggling with years of economic problems. And then we discover a multi-billion-dollar project that is supposed to grow food for the population, but might actually be aiming for very different goals. If you look at satellite pictures of Egypt, you can see the change with your own eyes. One thing is clear: this is a military project. It is fascinating to see how the colors of the country are shifting. But at the same time, official numbers already show that the project is not really working. The spending is hidden, the details are secret, and the whole thing is like a black box. Our research begins with Google Maps. When we look closely, we find the green circles scattered across Egypt, even in the middle of the desert. At first, they don't look that big, but when we zoom in, we realize each circle is hundreds of meters wide. A little to the left of these circles, we notice outlines of new circles already marked in the sand. Then we go to NASA's website and pull up old satellite images. We compare them with newer ones and see that most of these circles appeared only within the last 10 years. The description of the images tells us the name of this project: the New Delta. The New Delta is a massive farming project run by the Egyptian government. It has several official goals: grow more crops, reduce Egypt's dependence on imported food, create new jobs, and make the country's food supply stronger. To do this, the government wants to change almost 10,000 square kilometers of dry desert into farmland. For thousands of years, farming in Egypt has only been possible along the narrow strip of the Nile River and up north in the Nile Delta, right where the river meets the Mediterranean Sea. Nearly the entire country is desert, and only about 4% of Egypt's land can be used for farming. This is very small compared to other countries. Egypt has around 116 million people, making it the most populated country in the Arab world. By 2050, that number is expected to grow to 175 million. Almost all of them live along the Nile or in the Delta region. This makes it one of the most crowded places on Earth. Farms, homes, and factories all fight for space near the river. As more people need housing, farmland is often destroyed to make room for new buildings. The New Delta project could change all of this. State newspapers say that Egypt could increase its farmland by almost 1/4. And Egypt badly needs more farmland. Food security has been a serious problem for years. About 8.5% of Egyptians do not get enough food. According to the Global Hunger Index, 1 out of every 5 children suffers from stunted growth because of malnutrition. Many important foods, especially wheat, must be imported from other countries. In 2021, about 80% of Egypt's wheat came from only 2 places: Russia and Ukraine. Even then, this was already risky for Egypt, and then, in 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine. Wheat shipments stopped, and Egypt's food situation became even worse. Egypt hopes the New Delta can fix this by producing much more of its own food. We want to know how the project is doing, but quickly run into a problem. Our online research doesn't tell us much, so we decide to fly to Egypt to see the desert turning green for ourselves. But as soon as people hear we want to film, they start refusing to help. They say it is too dangerous. One expert even admits he is afraid for his life. We ask everywhere, but nobody will speak openly. In the end, we reach out to a close friend in Egypt for help. He explains, talking about government projects in Egypt is very tricky, especially if you want to criticize them. That explains why nobody wants to go on record. The New Delta project is not run by a normal company or even by a regular government department. It is led by the military. To understand why this matters, we have to look back at Egypt's recent history. In early 2011, hundreds of thousands of Egyptians went to the streets in Cairo. They demanded an end to the regime that had ruled for decades. They were protesting against corruption, violence, and economic struggles. For 18 days, protesters fought with police. Finally, President Hosni Mubarak, who had ruled for nearly 30 years, stepped down. Millions celebrated the end of the dictatorship. Hope filled the country. In 2012, Egypt held its first democratic elections. The winner was Mohamed Morsi, from the Muslim Brotherhood, an opponent of the old regime. But things did not improve under him. Only a year later, mass protests broke out again. The military removed him from power. The military crackdown was brutal. According to Human Rights Watch, more than 1,000 protesters were killed in a single event. The man behind the coup was General Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. He later ran for president in 2014 and won around 97% of the vote. Many believe the election was rigged. El-Sisi promised stability, security, and economic growth. But instead, Egypt quickly returned to dictatorship. Human rights collapsed. Peaceful protests were treated as terrorism. Journalists and critics were silenced, arrested, or tortured. Thousands are still in prison, and many people simply disappeared. Speaking out against the government now means risking your life. This same regime controls the New Delta project, just as it controls almost every big construction project in Egypt. We meet several experts outside Egypt since it's impossible to talk openly inside the country. Journalist Edmund Bauer explains that there is no transparency with these projects. The government only says they are great without giving real details. Urban planner David Sims adds that the New Delta is not the first project of this kind. For more than 100 years, Egypt's leaders have dreamed about conquering the desert. Many have tried. For example, the Qattara Depression Project was an old idea to flood a giant lowland area of the desert with seawater to create a huge lake and produce electricity. Plans appeared in the 1920s, 1950s, and even 1970s. At one point, a German engineer even suggested using nuclear bombs to dig a path for the water, but the project never happened because it was far too expensive and dangerous. Another attempt was the Toshka project in the 1960s and 1990s. This plan was to pump water from Lake Nasser to make new farmland and cities in the south. It was promised to be massive, but only a small part was ever completed. Most of the land stayed empty. Later, the El Salam Canal project in the late 1990s was supposed to bring water into the Sinai Desert to grow crops. A part of the canal was built, but most of the project failed. These examples show a clear pattern. Every Egyptian leader wants to start giant desert projects to prove his success. But most of them end up wasting money and failing. Will the New Delta be any different? Growing anything in the desert requires one thing above all: water. Lots of it. The New Delta uses water from several sources: groundwater, polluted lake water near Alexandria, and most importantly, the Nile River. Through satellite images, we can actually see two large canals being built. The first canal is 42 kilometers long and carries water from the Rosetta branch of the Nile into the desert. The second canal is even larger, 114-kilometer long, carrying 3.5 billion cubic meters of water each year. But this is not easy. In many places, water has to be pumped uphill, more than 100 meters. Pumping stations do this heavy work. Another key part of the project is Al-Masama, the largest wastewater treatment plant in the world. Built in just 2 years, it can clean 7.5 million cubic meters of water every day, enough for 24 million people in the U.S. The project also uses water from the Nubian sandstone aquifer, the largest underground water reservoir in the world. It stretches across 4 countries, but this water is fossil water, ancient water that does not get replaced. The deeper you go, the saltier it becomes. Eventually, it may become too salty to use. Once it's gone forever. When this water reaches the fields, the green circles appear. These circles are made by center pivot irrigation systems. A long sprinkler arm turns in a circle like the hand of a clock, watering the land evenly. You can see the same circles in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and even in the U.S. Thanks to this system, crops like corn, peanuts, potatoes, and wheat can grow right in the desert. But wheat needs a lot of water, and the desert soil is not as fertile as the land along the Nile. Farmers in the desert usually only get 1 harvest per year because of the extreme heat, while farms along the Nile can have 2 or even 3. To improve yields, fertilizers and pesticides are mixed into the irrigation water. The government says this is sustainable farming, but critics argue that once you stop watering, the desert will return immediately. The soil is still desert under the thin farming layer. How much does all this cost? Nobody knows for sure. The government does not release full budgets. We do know that the canals cost billions. The wastewater treatment plant cost billions more. Pumping water uphill also takes enormous amounts of energy and money. Earlier studies said that if water has to be lifted more than 30 meters, the cost of energy makes farming uneconomic. Yet, in the new delta, water is often lifted over 100 meters. When the project was announced in 2021, the budget was about $10.2 billion. By 2025, President El-Sisi admitted that just the infrastructure alone may cost between $9 and $13 billion. The new delta was supposed to solve Egypt's food insecurity. But has it? In one sense, yes. Crops are being harvested in the desert, but most of these crops never reach Egyptians. Instead, they are exported abroad. In 2023, Egypt exported a record 7.5 million tons of produce, earning $8.8 billion. Most exports were fruits, vegetables, and nuts. The government prefers to grow high-value crops for export rather than wheat for local people. President El-Sisi even admitted this. Why grow wheat, which needs lots of water and land, when you can grow citrus fruits, export them, and then use the money to buy wheat? This makes sense for trade, but it does little to help ordinary Egyptians. 2/3 of the population lives at or below the poverty line. Food security remains fragile. The country is drowning in debt, its currency has lost value, and the benefits of mega projects are not reaching the poor. Much of the revenue goes back into the state, and a big part is spent on weapons. Egypt faces wars and conflicts on almost all of its borders, from Sudan to Gaza to Libya. So the military keeps strengthening itself, while ordinary people still struggle. In the end, the new Delta project consumes huge resources. It is not really sustainable. It is extremely expensive, and it has not delivered the promised food security. Maybe the true purpose of projects like this is not food at all. Instead, they serve as powerful symbols. They let the government show off, claim progress, and distract people from deeper problems. A shiny new mega project is easier to announce than solving long-term poverty or building strong institutions. And the projects keep coming. In 2025, the government unveiled Jurian City, a brand new city in the desert with luxury apartments, a yacht harbor, skyscrapers, and a free economic zone. It is meant to attract tourists and money. All of these projects depend on one thing, the Nile. But even this is in danger. In 2022, Ethiopia finished building the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam on the Blue Nile, one of the Nile's most important tributaries. The dam will give Ethiopia huge amounts of electricity, but Egypt and Sudan fear it will reduce their share of water. Egypt calls the dam an existential threat. Relations between the countries are tense. The truth is simple. Egypt's survival depends on the Nile. Without it, The dream of turning the desert green will collapse. In the end, the new delta shows both Egypt's hopes and its struggles. It is a country trying to feed its people, but also a government using giant projects for power and control. And at the heart of it all lies one question that will decide Egypt's future. Will there be enough water?